Welcome to the Multiply Project podcast. I'm Craig Whitney.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. Craig, the world of church planning is smaller than people think.
It really, really is.
We literally ran into today's guest at a Lazy Dog restaurant recently in Chicago. We were on our way out as he was on his way in.
Yep, small world, massive mission. Today we're talking with that guest, Dave Ferguson, about the 16% mission.
And Dave challenges us to stop asking, how do I grow my church, and start asking, how do we multiply the kingdom?
Yeah, and you don't have to be a mega church to do this. You just have to decide that you're a multiplier. So let's jump in.
Dave, welcome to the Multiply Project podcast. It's good to have you today.
Hey, Jeff. It's good to be here. Craig, how you doing?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Good to be on.
The question is, have you been to a Lazy Dog lately?
Yes. And I think maybe the last time I was there, I saw you guys.
Okay. All right. There you go. Craig and I were at another Lazy Dog, but it was in Denver last week. And I thought maybe we'd run into you, but I was like, it's probably a little bit too far away.
Well, you both know Patrick O'Connell, who was our global director at New Thing and now is on our Exponential team. Yeah, that's his favorite place in the whole planet. So if you show up at the one in Chicago, there's a good chance you'll see Patrick.
Which is why we ran into
That's why we were there.
Because we had just finished.
Okay,
we had just finished with him. I was just pretty certain when you drove through the parking lot and saw us, you were just going to keep going. I thought, he's like, what are these guys doing here? So.
I think I told you, I thought it was like a flashback. I thought I was like in Orlando at an Exponential conference. I'm going like, holy Patrick and Jeff and Craig. Was I with Daniel Yang?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm going like, what is going on here?
All right, here's the big question.
Sure.
I mean, you're a big White Sox fan, so
yes, I am.
Do you have scheduled, like, are you and Pope Leo going to a game at some point? I mean, he's a big White Sox fan. You got that worked out?
I am delighted that you brought that up. So Pope Leo grew up down in the south suburbs, the same neighborhood as me.
Okay.
We ate at the same pizza place, Aurelio's Pizza, which, now if you're from Chicago, usually you're a Giordano's or Lou Malnati's fan. But if you're from the south suburbs, like I am, then you are a Joe Aurelio fan. So Pope Leo is also an Aurelio's fan. They actually have a Pope Pizza now. And yes, he's a White Sox fan. And this is good because I know this podcast is going to go all over the whole world. So I'm trying, this is sincere, okay? I'm actually trying to get a contact with the Pope right now.
All right.
So I got, you want to hear the whole story real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, you did not set this up. I just, on my own, asked you that question.
The notes say here, start with rapport.
That's what I'm doing.
And you're doing that. And so the people at YouVersion reached out to me because they knew I was from the south suburbs. And so they got their 1 billionth download coming up. And so they're looking for like celebrity type people and that kind of stuff to kind of give them a shout out. Hey, congratulations on your billionth download. And so somehow they thought I would know the Pope, which I wish I did. But anyway, so I put out all my feelers. So this is one more. I'm trying to get a contact for the Pope for Bobby and the gang at YouVersion so they can get a shout out.
We will do our best to get this to the Vatican.
Yes.
There, all the listeners. I mean, if someone has a contact with the Pope, I'm expecting to hear from him. Dave at exponential.org. Dave at exponential.org.
I love that. And I am so hopeful this works out. So
I will say good things about your podcast if it works out.
It will say good things. Dave, it is great to have you on. Thanks for joining us today. It's always good when we get to run into you. And who knows, I guess, I don't know what's next. Probably an Exponential. I think you'll run into Craig in California soon, and I'll be at Central gathering here soon too. So, hey, let's jump in. Speaking of Exponential, I would love to have you unpack the 16% mission for our listeners.
It would be a pleasure. Exponential, we want to be a catalyst for the 16% mission. It's not our mission. We want Jeff Bennett and Craig Whitney to own the 16%. We want everybody to own the 16% mission. And the 16% mission is, how do we see 16% of churches in the United States become reproducing or multiplying? And why is 16% so important? Well, 16% is a sociological tipping point. If you get 16% of anything, it can influence the whole. And for some of your listeners, they're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell. He made it popular. Before that, Everett Rogers, the guy who, with the innovation curve, said, no, there's 2.5% innovators, 13.5% early adopters, but 16%, you put that together, that'll influence the whole. Now, why church planting? Because church planting is the best evangelistic tool that we have. It's been researched. This goes way back now. I mean, the Covenant denomination did the homework on this one, and they found that brand new churches will see 3 to 4 times as many conversions as do established churches 10 years of age or older. So we know that to be true. But we also know, according to a Harvard longitudinal study, that the key factor in human flourishing is people's engagement in a faith community. And so if someone's engaged in a faith community, they're going to flourish. The community is going to flourish. So if we want people to find and follow Jesus, if we want people and want communities to flourish, it's going to happen through starting more and more new churches. And if we can make that 16% happen, we think that's a game changer. So we invite everybody who's listening here to be a part of that. And however we can help, we want to. That's our part of our mission. How do we help make that happen particularly in the U.S. and then beyond?
Dave, how does that tie back to the original becoming 5 framework, subtracting, plateauing, so forth, percentage-wise?
Yeah, one of the things that we did, this goes back about 10 years ago when we first. I mean, I could tell the quick story. I mean, I was on a plane sitting next to Todd Wilson, and we were talking. Todd's the co-founder of Exponential, and the conference had been, by most standards, you'd look at it and go, it's successful because, you get people showing up, and it was creating enough of a revenue we could pay the staff. And we kind of had the aha that, the same critique that some of us would make of large churches, you got butts in the seats and you got money coming in, but what are you actually getting done? Could be made of Exponential. And so we kind of had a heart to heart and said, our goal was never to start a conference. Our goal was to really see a church planting movement. And that's when we really nailed down, said, you know what, if we could see 16% of all churches in the United States become reproducing and multiplying churches, then we can influence the whole. Well, to do that, we started doing some homework, and that's what came up with what you just referred to, the Level 5 framework. And the Level 5 framework explains that there actually are 5 different levels of churches. Now, most people, unfortunately, think there's 3. We're trying to change that, but there's actually 5. So level 1 is what we call a subtracting church, a church in decline, seeing less people on mission this year than last year. Level 2 is what we call plateauing. So you maybe add a few, lost a few, but you're basically about the same. That's plateauing. Level 3 then is adding. So you've added a few more people than you lost. So you're starting to grow. You're starting to see that upward tick. Now, unfortunately, and we're starting to shift the mindset on this, a lot of people thought level 3 was as good as you can do. If I could just, a lot of pastors wake up kind of going like, hey, how do I grow my church? That's like the preoccupying question. And we want to change that. Instead, we want to go like, hey, guess what? There's also level 4 or level 5. And level 4 is a reproducing church. A church that's ever planted a church. And then level 5 is multiplying. And we define that as up to 4 generations, kind of like Acts 1:8 or 2 Timothy 2:2. And so, I mean, part of I think what makes it work too is, I mean, you guys will be like me on this one. I mean, do you really want to be a 3 if you could be a 4 or a 5? And so that's what we're challenging. Hey, why be a 3 when you can be a 4 or 5?
Yeah. You have researched this a couple different times along the way since you guys began doing that, trying to understand what's happening out there. You released a new set of data at the global conference back in March, and that 7% are currently multiplying. So that's a gap to that 16%. That's the goal. What did you find in that as kind of biggest takeaways for you? Maybe digging a little deeper in the data. Was there anything in there that was encouraging to you? Because obviously it's like, we're not there yet, but did you see anything that encouraged you? Like, okay, we're not at 16%, but there's some good indicators here, or this is something that's telling us that we need to really lean into?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are three probably takeaways that I'd probably update your audience on. One, I think at first glance, well, let's say, so the original study when we first did it came back and said only 4% of all church plants. Oh, I'm sorry, came back and said only 4% were actually reproducing or multiplying, level 4, level 5. Well, we did it again in, gosh, I think it was 2019 or something, right before COVID. And it came back at 7%, which was a huge jump. When you think about 360,000 churches in the United States, you're going 1 percentage point. You move the needle 3 percentage points in that time frame. That was a significant jump. Well, at first glance, when we did this report again in 2025, go like, oh, it's still at 7. That kind of sucks. But upon kind of more reflection, it was kind of like, okay, let's think about where we've been. And you guys know the landscape as well as I do. I mean, one of the things that happened, particularly in 2020 and 21, and even into 22 and beyond, was we were starting to see a lot of church planting networks across the United States. And when we went into COVID, and like the church I led in Chicago, we were closed for 51 weeks. So all of a sudden, I mean, there was almost this natural recoiling of all the churches going like, okay, good luck on church planting and good luck with my network. I mean, I hope to get back to that someday, but I got to make sure this thing survives. And that was kind of what happened. And a lot of the church planting networks, they're doing a lot of the planting, just kind of shut things down and didn't meet for almost a couple of years. So in retrospect, to go like, okay, after going through COVID and coming out on the other end and we're still at 7%, upon further reflection, I'm going like, you know what? Maybe that's not bad news after all. So that's one thing. I think the other thing they also found was those churches that were planted between 2020 and 2025. Okay, think about how hard it was to plant a church during that season. And both you guys are shaking your head, going like, "Oh, yeah." I'm glad I'm coaching. I'm glad I'm coaching church planters instead of planting a church. Yeah, it was super hard. But actually, 9% of those churches actually planted another church during that time frame. And I mean, to me, that was actually an encouraging number that not only did they plant a church, but they also planted another church during that time frame. So that was encouraging. Maybe the thing was most encouraging about it, and this actually was on the periphery, and this is some stuff that Warren Bird did. He found that 43% of all church plants in the last 5 years say part of their vision for the future is a multiplying network of churches. Let me just kind of say it again. So 43% of all church plants in the last 5 years say part of their vision for the future is a multiplying network. Now, again, they haven't started a multiplying network, but what it does say is they said, no, that's part of our vision. That's part of our aspiration. That's kind of what's burning inside me. And I think I think that's really good news for the kingdom, and candidly, kind of good news for folks like me and you, because you got 43% of the church planters are going like, here's what I'd like to do. I just don't know how to do it yet. And if we can come alongside them with the kind of tools that you guys offer and the kind of things that Exponential is trying to do, and we can help them, I mean, that's almost half the churches saying, no, we want to start a network, not just another church, but a whole network. So the 7% was kind of like, that sucks. Well, maybe not so bad after all. But then there were some other things in there that I'm going like, oh, okay, this is good news. So at Exponential, and we don't want to control it. We would love to be a catalyst for it, but we're setting our sights on. We'd love to see that needle move again in the next 5 years from 7 to 10%, and then really, 16% in the next 10 years, and then the three of us can go to Cabo.
In the winter, Dave, right? In the winter.
In the winter, yes, because it is awesome in the summer in Chicago.
It is encouraging, and a great point, Dave. I mean, for multiplication to happen, first there has to be a desire. And so I think that is something that the three of us are really encouraged by, is there's a growing desire. I would say even a growing angst among some pastors of like, not only do we need to multiply, but I'm a little uneasy that we're not yet. Like there's just some, you know, urgency to this. What would you say are two or three like key obstacles that keep churches from multiplying?
Um, a couple things immediately come to mind. And 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 you guys, I mean, chime in on this because you know as much about this as I do, or more. You guys know more about this than I do. I do think, and I alluded to this before. I think the prevailing question for many church leaders and pastors is still the question: how do I grow my church? Which feels like a good question, and it is a good question because healthy things grow. It's just not a great question. And the great question is how do we, and again, different than me and my own, but how do we do this together? Multiply, level 3, 4, 5, level 5, not level 3, grow God's kingdom and not just my church. When you and if we can get church leaders and pastors to fall asleep at night preoccupied with that question, how do we multiply God's kingdom? That'll be a game changer. That'll be a game changer. So I think they're kind of they're stuck at level 3. I think there's still enough where level 3, the largest, biggest, gets celebrated. And again, I mean, I'm the founding pastor of a large church. I don't have a problem with a large church, but if it's not multiplying, I think that's when you're not reaching your redemptive potential. So I think that's a biggie. And I think if you dive deep into it too, I think fundamentally where the biggest obstacle is they're probably not apprenticing two things. I'll say they're not making disciple makers, they're not apprenticing new leaders. They're not discipling disciple makers, and they're not apprenticing new leaders. And to me, if you plant a church and you start doing that and you teach that, you will inevitably plant churches. You would have to do something intentional to stop it. And that I've seen that happen, but you'd have to do something intentional to stop it. But if you're making disciple makers and you're apprenticing new leaders, it's going to happen. It's just going to happen.
That's so good. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a piece of the desire to multiply, a little bit of the caught in the growth mode in addition, and maybe not, maybe not fully understanding it. Multiplication may seem so big. It's like I'm going to have to change everything, and I think, over the last 2-3 decades of the American church, we've kind of fallen in love with creating moments rather than kind of empowering movements. And, I run into church leaders all the time. I go, hey, Jeff, 2/3 of our staff we hired for the weekend event. And so kind of to your point, the developing people, we're too busy putting on an event on the weekend. And again, I'm not critical of that because I go to a large church. I want to have a great weekend event. Like, I'm not looking for less than a great weekend event. But there's still shifts there when you think about growth mode. And again, it's not a negative, but there's a better way, and that's multiplication mode and thinking greater kingdom. And the funny thing is you get growth when that is your mindset of a greater kingdom. Like, that's the ironic part of it.
Yeah, I wish I could quote off the top of my head, but they did the homework on this too, and they compared churches that actually plant churches versus those churches that don't plant church. And I mean, and the ones that plant church actually grow faster too. And there's a lot of reasons, because I'm sure it comes out of an evangelistic heart. I'm sure it's because they're outward facing, they're kingdom minded, all those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, in some ways, if you're listening and you really just want to grow your church, go plant a church.
I know. So it seems counterintuitive, but it's true.
No, and I'm encouraged too, because like I'm going to be speaking at New Spring Church down in Spartanburg, that church. And I was talking to Brad, and he said, yeah, part of their vision is, they're opening another campus this weekend, but they're also going to plant 10 churches in the next 5 years. I just had breakfast, and I'm talking about, these are kind of classic big churches. Sean Williams, you know Sean? Sean's the new lead pastor at Willow. So he was on our team for like 15 years. Great dude. And he was talking about part of their vision for the future. And again, Willow's been very large influential church, but has never planted church. He's like, no, we're going to start planting churches. I'm like, this is awesome. So I think some things are starting to shift out there, and anyway, enough. I could go on.
Totally agree. I'm getting to do some work with Flatirons Church out in Colorado. They're wanting, their goal is to plant 30 churches in the next 10 years. And some of that's through coming alongside some like-minded planters and supporting them, but they also want to grow up planters from within that they send out towards the latter half of that. So I think there is a lot of encouraging signs. All right, so we talked about obstacles. On the flip side, what are some accelerators that can help churches just kind of move forward?
Well, I mean, again, in the accelerator, I mean, I named the accelerators is the same as the obstacle. I mean, if particularly, I think with I'll start with the senior leader and then the senior leadership. But if they will be making disciple makers, and if they're apprenticing leaders, they're going to create a culture where everybody else is doing it. And I think that's so important. So, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I would love to do differently. But one of the things I tried to be intentional about at Community too was to, I'd always be in a small group and always try to have a leader that I was apprenticing, and those people that I'm trying to make into disciple makers. And I think if you're doing that, you're inevitably going to be talking about it even on the weekend. It's going to come out in the conversation in the hallways as you're talking to folks. And what happens is that the values and the narrative and the behaviors are going to create this culture that's going to be a culture of multiplication. So I guess if I was going to put bullet points on it, I would tell leaders, okay, make sure you're making disciple makers, and you're probably doing that in a missional community or small group, some kind of group of 16, 12, something like that. Make sure you have an apprentice leader. That's number 2 or more. You can have 2 or 3. That probably works even better. And then out of that, just be telling the stories of what you're doing and encourage and set the bar where everybody else is doing that. And so then you got the values, narratives, behaviors. That's going to create a culture. That'd be the third thing, create a culture. And if you do those things, what's going to come out of that is going to be a reproducing, multiplying church. What would you, I mean, you guys, kind of funny you're interviewing me. What would you guys add to that?
I mean, I think that really, those are really key things. I think a lot of times we think about this and we think, oh, I got to go change our whole church program. And people get stuck sort of on these like, man, how do I navigate all that change? And it's really, for a key leader, it's really about changing some of your personal habits, right? Probably the one thing that I would add to that is spending time with people that are far from God so that you personally are making disciples of those who are not yet followers of Jesus, right? That you're helping people grow into being disciple makers and that you're developing leaders. If you prioritize those 3 things and then do what you're doing, tell the stories. I wrote about the book that I wrote earlier this year, and thank you for writing a very nice, friendly beginning to that, right? It's this 4-step reel, right? Call, equip, send, and then the 4th piece is celebrate. And the celebrate is just, you got to tell the story so that more calling, equipping, and sending happens, right? And that's what you're saying. Those 3 things plus tell the stories creates a culture. And if those happen, eventually you're just going to have people going, hey, can we go plant a church? And you'll have a mindset that instead of saying no, we'll say absolutely yes, how do we help? So I would agree. It starts there. It's not and I think that's one of the challenges maybe that goes with growth. Our growth mindset has led to a programmatic operating system rather than a people-oriented operating system. And so that's one of the shifts. And so if you shift to a people-oriented operating system and that's really your focus, and you do those 3 behaviors, you can do the exact same program you're doing right now. You don't need to change any of that stuff that causes people to, why did you change? Just keep doing it until somebody wakes up and realizes everything changed because of those habits.
Yeah, when I'm talking to folks that are on church staffs, and maybe some are listening right now too, there'll be a frustration. Well, my senior pastor doesn't get it. Maybe they've read Hero Maker, and I'm talking about this kind of stuff, and I'm going, no. In your student ministry, you can do this. In your silo, you just start with your own group and have an apprentice leader. And guess what? If you end up multiplying small groups, then it goes all of a sudden from 1 to 3 to 10. Your senior pastor's gonna love it.
He's going to notice.
Right. And guess what? If you're a worship leader, if you're a worship pastor, you might call it a second chair, you might call it a shadow, you might give it a different name. But again, if you got a worship leader who's training somebody else, or you got somebody in the sound booth who has someone looking over their shoulder while you're doing it, again, you're going to just have a deeper bench. When you're ready to start a new site, you're ready to plant a church, you can send some of those folks. And guess what? Your senior pastor is going to love it. And you can be involved in doing this, even within those silos, even if the larger organization's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody can start those 3 behaviors tomorrow.
And that's so good. Multiply Project exists to help churches and church leaders to call, equip, and send church planters from within. And, you got at some really good things, because it really is in those, it's not big changes, it's daily, weekly habits, activities that cause these things to happen. And you modeled this at Community. So I want to unpack that a little bit more, because you already talked about it a little bit, but what personal habits and practices did you have built into your weekly schedule that just really led to multiplication in your context? I mean, even to the point, we know your friends, we know several folks that you called out of the marketplace into ministry. What were some of those just daily, weekly, monthly habits that you had?
I'll tell you, let's do this. Let me tell you a story, because I think it'll fit what you guys are trying to do, and hopefully it'll encourage your audience. And then I'll give you kind of some habits. And you may have heard me refer to this before. So there's a guy in my small group, Rick, who loves folks in the special needs community. All right, he just you probably had people in your small groups like this before, your missional community. His highlight of his summer, he goes to camp with them and spends a week with them, just loves it. They love him. He comes back and, tearfully tells the story over and over and over again. He loves it so much. Okay. He just loves it. So he's one of the guys that if I was to name people I'm trying to make into disciple makers, he's one of those guys. He's actually in my small group that meets on Tuesdays, and they actually host it, Rick and his wife. And he came to an Exponential conference, actually one of them in Chicago. And he came, and as we always do at Exponential, we got to the 5th session, and in the 5th session, there's like a call to action. And the call to action is always, will you plant a church? And if you'll plant a church, we want you to come forward. We're going to pray for you, anoint you, and commission you to go. It's like your ordination. So my buddy Rick, okay, he's in sales. Okay, he's not a pastor. He's not a missionary. He's been done real well in sales, and loves the special needs community. He comes to Exponential, and James Meeks. You guys know James? James was speaking. He was doing the closing session, and he gets on a little bit of a roll, and he says, listen, some of y'all need to plant a church. And he said, if you're thinking about planting a church, you do not have to have a building. You just need to be available. And then he said, you don't have to have money to plant a church. You just need to be available. And then he said, you don't need to go to seminary to plant a church. You just need to be available. And next thing I know, because he's down the road, people are coming forward, and Rick goes forward. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? And later on I said, so, I debriefed him. So what's going on? And he said, if you're available, and I'm available. The funny part of the story too, it was like about 3 months later, he actually lost his job in sales. And his comment to me, I'm more available than ever. He tells our small group that he's prayed this prayer, that I'm available. And he's thinking about how can he plant a church now that's going to reach the special needs community. And so our whole small group, okay, we had him sit on the corner of his coffee table in his house, and we make a circle around him, and all of us put our hands on him. And and again, we're a non-denominational church, so we can kind of ordain whoever we want, however we want.
Anytime you want.
Anytime we want. And we're like, all right, we're going to pray for you. This is your commissioning. You go do it. And so we prayed for him. And within the next year, he went through we have like about a 10-week micro church training. He went through that training, and then he ended up launching a church for the special needs community, because he had a network of folks. And a lot of those folks, they might try to come to kind of our more traditional churches, but when the person in their family that has special needs behaves in a way that's just the way they do and can't control it, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. Well, anyway, so he has the first service in a gym at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night. And I think they had like 125 people. And for the last like 2 years now, he's had, 75 to 100 people. And like, he's never thought about getting paid. He just loves it, loves it, loves it, and talks nonstop about it.
That is awesome. What a
And I
great story.
think that's in a lot of people out there. We just need a missional imagination for making it happen. Okay, what small part maybe did I get to play in that? And so this is now I'll speak to church leaders. I would encourage you, again, it kind of goes back to some of the things we're talking about. You need to lead at the smallest level of your organization, and then also at the largest level, and let other people do everything in between as it grows. So like when we first started Community Christian Church 30 years ago, the first thing we did is we went out and we started small groups that were going to be evangelistic and reproducing, and all of us got an apprentice leader. So I've tried to continue to do that over and over and over again. Now, as that grew, as we started multiple services, and we started multiple sites, as we started church planting networks and then movements, and started, eventually we got to 69 countries around the world. I let everybody else do all the stuff in between, but I would meet with like network leaders or movement leaders, whatever you wanted to call them, and help apprentice them. But then I would still, over here on the smallest, I'd still lead my small group. And that's where this happened with Rick in our small group. And I just happened to be in that group. But the great thing is I get to tell the story too. And it's exactly what you were, Jeff or Craig, one of you were saying too. You're making disciple makers, you're apprenticing another leader, and then you're sharing the story. And it hopefully creates a culture where you're going like, oh, if Rick can do that for them, then maybe I could do this for others. So again, I guess for the takeaway on that, I would encourage you, lead at the smallest level and be constantly reproducing, developing leaders there, and then continue to grow with it and lead at the largest level, because you can't do everything in between. Otherwise you'll kill yourself, and you don't want that. You want to be a healthy leader because you want to reproduce that as well. Then lead at the largest level.
Yeah, that is really great advice, David. And I think a lot of pastors, as churches grow, end up feeling overwhelmed, overworked, all those kinds of things. And a lot of times what happens is they just sort of start giving stuff up from the bottom. And sometimes they end up giving stuff at the top, and they end up spending all their time in the middle. And so sort of the understanding and the discipline to say, nope, I've got to push out to those edges, but that wisdom to say, don't lose that engagement at the lowest level, whatever you just define that as in your church. Lead a small group, disciple one-on-one, lead a missional community, like whatever that looks like, that pathway looks at your church. Like you got to keep immersed in that, lead the organization, and just like you said, just let go of everything else in the middle. Whatever in the middle you're doing isn't nearly as important as being in that small group on Tuesday night.
100%. And yeah, because it's the culture you're creating at that point. Here's a great example, maybe the best example I know of it right now. You guys know Nikki Gumbel? So Nikki was the vicar at HTB, Holy Trinity Brompton. He was the guy who really made Alpha popular. And Alpha, I think, is arguably maybe the greatest evangelistic tool that the church has ever had. I mean, and you could put Alpha right up there as far as its reach with Billy Graham and the Apostle Paul. I mean, no hyperbole. So this came from Nikki. Okay, so his influence is all over the planet and growing dramatically, I might add. But the thing that most impressed me about Nikki, we got to have lunch. We had lunch in May when I was over there in London with him and Pippa. I think I won't get the number exactly right, but I think he's getting ready to lead his 104th Alpha group. He always
That's cool.
However often they do 2 or 3 times a year, he always leads one. He personally leads an Alpha. Is that awesome?
That's very cool. Yeah.
And I'm just saying, and he's a really bright guy. This is not a wildly charismatic leader. This is the kind of stuff that we can all do. If if you just do that same stuff and teach other people to do the same stuff, and you do it for a long time, the impact you can make is profound, just profound. And I think he's. In fact, I got a book. I didn't even think I was going. I got a book coming out in March. It's called Multiplier. How healthy leaders create lasting impact, and I think he's a great example of that. Because here's the other thing he does. Here's what's funny. I'm sorry. I'll let you get back to your question. So in the morning, every morning, he does like a mini triathlon. This is a guy in his 70s. So he gets up and runs, then he bikes, and he goes for a swim. He does that from about like 8. No, what did he say? I think he has, I mean, it's like 8 to 11. And then he has a prayer meeting, and the prayer meeting's with him and a few other people that have been around for a long time. And he said, the truth is we only pray for about 5 minutes and we have a good time the rest of it. Something like that. But basically, I mean, here he's taking care of himself, but what a global impact this dude's had too. That's just anyway. So
in fact,
yeah, go for it.
He might know Pope Leo.
Oh, maybe if he listens, you're right. Thank you for
There's
your
your connection.
Everybody, Dave Ferguson, Dave at exponential.org. I'm looking for a contact to Pope Leo, even though he grew up in my neighborhood.
So let's talk a little bit about global, Dave. In your leadership at Community, New Thing, Exponential, there was a point at which that went global, and you have built a lot of relationships around the world. And I'm just curious what you're observing, seeing that is happening in parts of the global church that's producing the fruit of multiplication that maybe is missing some here. Some of that might be cultural, but I think there are some behaviors and practices when you look around the world and go, they're just doing things we're not, and then you see the fruit of those things. I'm curious what you see in that context. Think we ought to learn from them.
Yeah. The first people that come to mind are some of my friends at Worship Harvest in Kampala, Uganda. Apostle Moses Bukisa, he spoke at Exponential last year. We're going to have him back this year. The stuff we've been talking about for the last, 36 minutes. I mean, he actually does it. And it's not like some African secret. It's like he is making disciple makers, and he is apprenticing leaders, and he's teaching his people to do the same. And the trajectory of that place has been remarkable. In fact, one of the things that's fascinating while I was there, if you walked around, a lot of people were wearing T-shirts that says, "Who's your 12? Who's your 12?" And basically, it's that first fundamental question: who are the 12 people that you're making into disciple makers? And I don't know how to say it other than they're just doing the stuff that we, let's be honest, the three of us, even we sometimes talk about and write about more than we do. He's actually doing the stuff. And so with young leaders too. I mean, really young leaders. And also too, what's also interesting about the place, a lot of women leaders. And it's not like he's trying to do it with young leaders or women leaders. It's just like that's who's emerging, and they're crushing it. Yeah. So I mean, that comes to mind immediately.
Is there? I guess this really is a curiosity question. I think there's something about our American mindset. I don't even want to say it's necessarily the church's mindset. I think it's a sort of part of American culture. It's like we're always looking for the silver bullet. We're looking for the one little thing, or the one thing we're going to do that changes everything. And so we go try this, we try that, and we do all these things, and none of them ever really produce the results. And somehow we miss the fact that doing simple things over and over and over and over again for a long period of time produces phenomenal outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think to our credit, as you get a chance to travel, I think we are remarkably entrepreneurial, which is a strong suit for church planning.
Yes.
But, okay, since we're just kind of freewheeling here, I'll throw a couple things. when I was in, there is something when I was in Europe in May. I was in Oxford a few different times, but one of the times I was in Oxford, I'm sitting in the crowd and I'm listening to Stephen Foster interview N.T. Wright. Sounds like pretty impressive, right? I mean, you're like, wow. I would love to have both those guys at Exponential. How did that happen? It's like this is a big deal, right? But then it hit me too. I'm sitting in St. Aldate's Church, and this is a church that's like been around literally for almost 1,000 years, like the building. Okay, and all of a sudden you're going like, okay, that is Stephen Foster. He's a bright young guy, and N.T. Wright, yeah, he's probably the leading New Testament scholar right now. But the truth is, you know what? This is just like one moment in a. If it's a book, if St. Aldate's was a book, this is barely a page in a chapter in a section of that book. It's and there's something about being in Europe that gives you an appropriate kind of smallness. That I think also maybe the smallness allows you to kind of see the long view of things. So like with Nicky Gumbel. So like Nicky, before Nicky was the vicar of Holy Trinity Brompton, there was a guy named Sandy Miller who was that, and there was a successful transition there. And after Nicky was, then they handed it off to Archie. And so I mean, and I think there's in other parts of the world maybe because they're not as new. There's an appropriate smallness which allows you to kind of not be in as big a hurry or not think you're as big a deal. Because it's entirely possible that you could come to Community Christian Church. I hope this will never happen. You could come to this Community Christian Church and you go like, oh, this is the church that Dave started. Oh, these are the buildings that, helped build, right? When you go to St. Aldate's, I don't know. I mean, it's not even.
Who led the capital campaign, right?
Right, exactly. That only happens in America. Does that make sense? And I think there's something about that makes us think about right now the immediacy and like I'm a big deal. Where maybe in other parts of the world, and certainly true in Europe, probably in Africa too, you're not. I definitely felt that in Europe. There's an appropriate amount of smallness.
Yeah. There's the time factor too, the generations. I shared this a couple weeks ago. My first granddaughter was born back in April, and so so I'm sort of now living the grandkids are the greatest thing ever, right? People say that all the time, and it's like, yeah, okay, and then you have one, and you're like, oh, they're right, this is the greatest thing ever. All right, it's awesome. But one of the things that got me thinking is, like, that's not even a concept in the American church. Like, it's a big deal for us to think about having a daughter church, right? Like just reproducing the thought. We just don't to think generationally, like, who are the, children the churches we plant are going to have, and, who are there, like that sort of generation. It's like it doesn't even exist within the context of
okay, so here you go. Here's a story so your listeners will have one, okay? So last weekend, Sue and I drove to Waverly, Iowa, because Waverly, Iowa. My youngest son is just started in January as the assistant cross country and distance track and field coach. He's passionate about that, wants to be a head coach in that, and they actually have the number 2 team in the nation, and it's a great place for him to learn. So he just started that job in January. So Sue and I drive out there. Well, the church we attended is Richwood's Church, and the pastor there is a guy named Aaron Bird. I was surprised to find out that Aaron Bird did a leadership residency at Restore Community Church in Kansas City with Troy and Janet McMahon. That would be Janet Jackson.
That would be cool. Yeah.
And for those of your listeners, and it was about 15 years ago that Community Christian planted Restore Community Church out in Kansas City. And so here I am in this church in Waverly, Iowa, with my son. He now attends that church, and it's like a granddaughter church of ours.
Yes.
And it's, you don't you don't realize, hold it. So the church that we helped plant 15 years ago planted a church that now my kid's going to.
Yep.
It's almost as good as having grandkids.
It's pretty close,
It-
isn't it?
Pretty close.
It's so funny that you mentioned that too,
That's
because
so
I
great.
know Aaron. Like that's just crazy small world. So it's
Yeah,
amazing.
we need those kind of stories to motivate us. And that
Yeah.
was, I mean, guess what? That's a big deal. That's a big deal that
Yeah.
my kid has a church that he's attending, that he likes, all the stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, yeah, just that generational thinking. I did back to your point about just the time. I think that's the other thing is we think in such short time frames that multiplication feels like it takes too long. And so we got to do something right now. But when you step back and you look at what produces fruit, you realize no, it's just that steady multiplication over time that
And it's not just qualitative fruit, like, oh, maybe you'll accidentally plant a church that your kids will go to. It's quantitative. I'm telling you, my experience has been too. I mean, this thing is like J curve, because what happened through New Thing. I mean, it took a long time before all of a sudden we were planting churches that were planting churches or planting networks that were reproducing networks. And then it was just like over the course of it seemed like, I mean, make 7 or 8 years, all of a sudden it went going like, oh my gosh, somehow we have a footprint in 69 countries. And there's nothing exceptional about that. You just keep doing the stuff.
Right. Yeah.
You
So
tell
often
people,
we're not patient enough. We don't think about the long game. Finite in our thinking, not infinite, being a part of a larger story. But yeah, the fruit starts happening significant. Yeah.
and that's what
So
I mean, I
good.
think that's most of us, there's a big part of, I think for all of us that we long for that. We go like, I would just like for my life to count. I'd like to make an impact. And what I love about our conversation here, you do not have to be a brilliant communicator. You do not have to be a wildly gifted leader or a charismatic. You just kind of keep doing the stuff that Jesus taught us to do: make disciple makers, apprentice leaders, mobilize them. Just keep doing it over and teach over.
Daily, weekly, monthly habits, those
Yep.
critical activities that make a huge impact. Hey, before we let you go, there's lots of exciting changes at Exponential, even with your role, a new team. What would you want pastors and leaders listening to this podcast to know about what's coming?
Well, first of all, if I can be of assistance to anybody listening in here, my email, we've already given it, or if you have a contact with the Pope, Dave at exponential.org. We really do. We want to have a disposition, and I hope it comes across over again that all the stuff we're talking about, you can do it, and we want to help. You can do it, and we want to help. And we feel like that's our job, and if we do that together, we can see that 16% mission happen. We are excited about opportunities to be able to partner with other people in other parts of the world. We see that in the future. We don't want to do it in a way where we're showing up as the Americans who got it figured out, but instead, if we get the same kind of disposition, if we believe they can do it, and if there's a way we can help, we'd like to be a part of it. The last thing is um, I sometimes look over my shoulder at the American church. I see what the churches we planted over the last 20 years, and some of them that are wearing the tag evangelical, and I think we can do better. I think we can be more compassionate. I think we can more reflect the love of Jesus. And so one of the things that I would love to see is I not only want more churches, but I'd love to see, I don't know, can we put it this way, better churches. And I think we can do quantitative and qualitative at the same thing. And I know you guys feel the same way. So anyway,
yeah.
we would love to help with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. I know I live out in California, Sacramento, but I know you've been out in the Bay Area, so you're making that offer to help. I know you've been out here really helping, and there's some like incredible things that are happening in the Bay Area, seemingly for the first time ever, certainly the first time in our lifetimes. So for anybody who's wondering, like, would Dave really help? It's like, yeah, he will. So thank you for the help you've been giving them, and I know that probably other places around the country too. And it's great to see that momentum. Awesome having you here, Dave. Thanks for taking time to hang out with us today. share some thoughts, and we really appreciate that. We really appreciate the mission of Exponential. Obviously, we see ourselves as co-partners in this, working towards that 16%. And so really grateful for everything that you do and that Exponential does, and grateful to have you join us today.
Thanks.
Yep. Super grateful for you. See you at a Lazy Dog sometime soon, probably.
Or a White Sox game with the Pope.
Yes. Yeah. If this goes down, we want to go to the game.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
See ya.
That conversation with Dave frames the tension perfectly. Why be a level 3 church just adding people when you could be a level 4 or 5 church that multiplies?
Exactly. And the solution was surprising. Right? Dave didn't say work harder. He said stop managing the middle.
Yeah, that's your one takeaway today. Stop managing the middle. If you want to multiply, you've got to lead at the edges. I love that. Personal discipleship and big picture vision. Let your leaders handle everything in between.
Yeah, and if you really want to see where your church currently lands on the multiplication scale, and go to multiplyproject.org and grab our free church multiplication readiness assessment. We probably ought to come up with a shorter name for that, but it is the first step to moving the needle, to see where your church is at in your readiness to multiply.
So true. We'll see you next time.